I stood in the glass conference room, watching Derek Langford tear apart 6 months of my life. My expansion strategy lay scattered across the table like broken promises. "Amateur hour," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Marcus, stick to what you know, data entry." The executives laughed. I felt my face burn. I'd poured everything into that proposal, worked weekends, missed my daughter's recital. Derek didn't even read past page 3. He just needed someone to humiliate, and I was convenient. My hands shook as I gathered the papers. The CFO wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek's assistant smirked from the corner. I walked out of that room a different person, not broken, awake. 3 weeks later, I watched Derek on the company livestream, presenting my strategy word for word as his brilliant vision. He called it the Langford Initiative. The chat exploded with praise. My phone buzzed with congratulations meant for him. I sat in my cubicle, surrounded by silence, and smiled for the first time since that meeting. He'd just made a terrible mistake. The company's stock jumped 40% in 2 weeks. Derek's face appeared in Forbes, Business Insider, and the Wall Street Journal. Visionary CEO Derek Langford revolutionizes market expansion, the headlines read. My inbox filled with internal emails praising his genius. The board gave him $1 million bonus. I received a company-wide email thanking the team for their support. Not my name, not even a mention. I watched him accept an industry award on stage, talking about his innovative thinking and bold leadership. Every word was mine. Every chart, every projection, every risk analysis stolen. I documented everything, kept copies, timestamps, email drafts, but who would believe me? He was the CEO. I was just Marcus Webb, senior analyst, invisible and replaceable. Then came the final insult. Derek announced a new VP of strategy. I refreshed my email, waiting for the promotion I'd earned. Instead, he gave it to his nephew Kyle, 26 years old, MBA from his father's alma mater, 0 experience in our industry. I stared at that announcement until my screen went dark. I didn't quit, everyone expected me to. HR probably had my exit paperwork ready. Instead, I started coming in early and leaving late. I told my wife it was a big project. That wasn't a lie. I began auditing everything, implementation reports, financial projections, vendor contracts, expansion timelines. Derek's version of my strategy was everywhere, but something felt wrong. The numbers didn't align. Revenue projections were inflated by 30%. Cost estimates were slashed impossibly low. Market penetration rates assumed 0 competition. I compared his public presentations to the actual operational data. The gaps were enormous. Derek didn't understand what he'd stolen. He'd grabbed the glossy summary but missed the foundation. He was running my strategy like a child driving a sports car, fast, reckless, and headed for a wall. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Fake supplier invoices, backdated contracts. Revenue booked before sales closed. I created a folder on my encrypted drive and named it simply Evidence. Every night I added more files. My anger transformed into something colder, sharper. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was patient. The cracks started showing during the quarterly review. Derek stood at the front of the boardroom, confident as ever, presenting record growth. The numbers looked beautiful on his slides. Then the CFO, Patricia Holmes, asked a simple question. Can you explain the 30% variance in supplier costs? Derek blinked. That's operational efficiency. Patricia's expression didn't change. Which suppliers specifically? He fumbled through his notes. I'll have my team send details. She nodded slowly. I watched from my seat in the back. After the meeting, whispers started in the hallway. Did Derek seem off to you? Someone asked. I didn't contribute, I just listened. Over the next week, middle managers started coming to me with questions. Not to Derek, to me. Marcus, these expansion timelines don't make sense. Marcus, why are we entering 3 markets simultaneously? Marcus, did you see the supplier contracts? I answered carefully, honestly, planting seeds of doubt without ever criticizing Derek directly. I became the unofficial translator of his vision. People trusted me. Derek noticed. I saw him watching me from his office, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight. The confrontation came during a department meeting. Derek walked in 20 minutes late, tie loosened, stress written across his face. Halfway through the agenda, he turned to me. Marcus, since you love questioning everything, explain why our operational costs have doubled. The room went silent. Everyone's eyes shifted to me. I took a breath. This was the moment. I stood up calmly and walked to the whiteboard. The original strategy allocated gradual market entry to control costs, I said, drawing a timeline. But we entered all 3 markets simultaneously, tripling vendor contracts, logistics, and staffing. I wrote numbers. We also front-loaded marketing spend that was supposed to phase over 18 months. Derek's face reddened. That's aggressive growth. It's unsustainable growth, I said quietly. The model required sequential expansion to maintain cash flow. Patricia, the CFO, was nodding. Other executives leaned forward. Are you saying I don't understand my own strategy? Derek's voice rose. I met his eyes. I'm saying the implementation diverged from the original plan. The room erupted in questions. For 10 minutes I explained what should have happened versus what did. Derek stood frozen as his authority dissolved. When the meeting ended, people applauded. Not for him, for me. That night, I received an email marked urgent. Organizational restructuring notice. My stomach dropped. Effective immediately, I was being transferred to Operations Division C, a basement unit responsible for legacy system maintenance. My salary would remain the same, but my title changed to Operations Analyst. No more strategy, no more visibility. The message was clear. Derek was burying me. I printed the email and added it to my evidence folder. My wife asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. That wasn't entirely true. Part of me wanted to rage, to march into Derek's office and expose everything. But I'd learned something crucial in that boardroom. People were starting to doubt him. If I pushed now, he'd spin it as sour grapes from a disgruntled employee. I needed more time, so I packed my desk and moved to the basement. The space was dusty, filled with outdated servers and forgotten equipment. 3 other people worked there, veterans who'd been exiled by previous executives. They looked up when I arrived, surprised anyone new was being sent down. "Welcome to the graveyard," one of them said. I smiled. "I think you mean the war room." The basement became my advantage. No one watched us. No executives visited. We were invisible. My new colleagues, Trevor, an infrastructure specialist, Yuki, a data architect, and Paulo, a compliance auditor, had been down here for years. They knew where every skeleton was buried. Trevor had maintained the servers during 3 CEO transitions. Yuki had built the original data systems. Paulo had audited every major contract since 2015. Over coffee one morning, I asked casually, "Did Derek change much when he took over?" Trevor snorted. "Changed everything. Fired anyone who questioned him. We stayed quiet, so we survived." "He seemed smart at first," Yuki added, "but he doesn't understand the systems, just wants results without asking how." Paulo leaned forward. "You want to know something interesting? 3 months ago, he had me approve supplier contracts without proper documentation. When I pushed back, he said the board already approved them." He paused. "They hadn't. I felt electricity run through me." "Do you still have those contracts?" Paulo smiled slowly. "I keep copies of everything." That afternoon, we spread documents across a table. The pattern was undeniable. Derek had been cutting corners and covering tracks since day one. I spent 3 weeks rebuilding my original strategy model from scratch. Not just the presentation Derek stole, the entire framework with every calculation, assumption, and risk factor. I included implementation timelines, cost projections, market analysis, and contingency plans. Then I created a second document comparing my model to Derek's execution. The differences were staggering. Where I recommended sequential market entry, Derek launched everywhere simultaneously. Where I budgeted conservatively, he spent recklessly. Where I built in safety margins, he eliminated them for better optics. But the worst part was the fraud. Derek had created fake supplier invoices to hide cost overruns. He'd backdated contracts to meet board deadlines. He'd booked revenue from deals that hadn't closed. He'd inflated projections to justify his bonus. Every lie was documented in company systems. He just assumed no one would look. I compiled everything into a single file. Financial records, email trails, contract discrepancies, timeline comparisons, and my original strategy documents with timestamps proving I'd created them months before Derek's presentation. I titled it The Langford Fraud. Then I encrypted it and stored 3 copies in different locations. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. A recruiter called on a Tuesday. "Marcus Webb, I represent a competitor interested in your expertise, specifically your knowledge of expansion strategy." My heart raced. "How did you get my name? Let's just say your work has a reputation beyond your current title." She offered a 30% raise and a director position. I almost said yes. Walking away would be easier. Let Derek crash and burn without me, but then I'd never get my name back. I'd never prove what he stole. And hundreds of employees would suffer when his house of cards collapsed. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready to leave." She paused. "You're sure? This is a significant opportunity." "I'm sure." After I hung up, I sat in the basement office, staring at my evidence folder. The recruiter's call proved something crucial. People knew my work was valuable. Derek's theft hadn't erased me completely. My reputation existed beyond his lies. For the first time since that humiliating boardroom meeting, I felt powerful. I wasn't trapped in the basement. I was positioned exactly where I needed to be, invisible, underestimated, and gathering ammunition while Derek stood in the spotlight, completely unaware of what was coming. Patricia Holmes appeared in the basement on a Thursday afternoon. The CFO never came down here, ever. My colleagues scattered like startled birds. She stood in the doorway, perfectly professional in her grey suit, and said 5 words: "We need to talk privately." We walked to an unused storage room. She closed the door. "Off the record," she began, "I know you wrote the expansion strategy. I reviewed the file timestamps when Derek first presented it." I froze. She continued, "I also know the implementation is failing. Costs are spiraling. Revenue projections were fantasy. The board is starting to ask questions Derek can't answer. Why are you telling me this? My voice barely worked. Because in 3 weeks we have a comprehensive audit. Derek will be exposed whether you do anything or not, but if he goes down alone, the company might not survive the fallout. We need someone who actually understands the strategy to fix this mess. She looked at me directly. Do you still have your original work? I didn't answer immediately. This could be a trap, but Patricia had always been honest, even when it was uncomfortable. I have everything, I said finally. She nodded. Keep it safe, you're going to need it. Then she left. I stood alone in that storage room, hands shaking, realizing the game had just changed completely. I started with something small, a single-page report on supplier cost discrepancies. Nothing dramatic, just facts and numbers. I sent it anonymously to 3 board members through an encrypted email service. Within 48 hours, Derek called an emergency leadership meeting. I watched via the internal livestream from my basement desk. He looked exhausted, tie crooked, sweat visible on his forehead. Someone is spreading misinformation about our expansion, he announced. This appears to be sabotage. He demanded it track down the source. He wanted security investigations. He even suggested a loyalty pledge for executives. People shifted uncomfortably. Sabotage, it was just data, true data. After the meeting, my phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. Did you just poke the bear? I smiled, just testing his defenses. Over the next week, Derek became increasingly paranoid. He started CCing himself on every email. He scheduled surprise audits of random departments. He questioned people's commitment in public meetings. His desperation was showing, and that's when I knew he understood he was losing control but had no idea how to stop it. One afternoon, he appeared in the basement. We all looked up, startled. He walked straight to my desk. I need your help, Marcus. Derek stood at my desk, trying to look commanding but mostly looking cornered. I need your original projections, the detailed models. I leaned back in my chair. Why? Because. He glanced at Trevor and the others. Can we speak privately? We went to a conference room that smelled like mold. Derek closed the door and dropped the CEO act. The board is asking questions I can't answer. You built this strategy, you know how it works. You said it was your strategy. He flinched. Marcus, I know I handled things poorly. But right now the company needs. You mean you need? Silence. His jaw worked. I'm offering you a bonus, $20,000 for consulting support. I made him wait, watching him sweat. This man had humiliated me, stolen my work, and tried to bury me in a basement. Now he was begging. I'll think about it, I said finally. His face reddened. This isn't a negotiation. Yes, it is. I stood up. You have 1 week until the audit. I'll let you know. I walked out, leaving him standing alone in that conference room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from power. For the first time since this nightmare started, Derek needed me more than I needed him, and he knew it. That weekend, I rehearsed everything. I sat at my home office, spreading documents across every surface, connecting threads, memorizing details. My evidence was comprehensive, but presenting it mattered. I needed to be calm, factual, unshakable. I practiced explaining the fraud without emotion. I rehearsed responses to every possible defense Derek might offer. My wife watched from the doorway. You're really doing this? I have to. What if it backfires? I looked at her. Then at least I tried. At least I didn't let him win. She nodded slowly. I'm proud of you, scared but proud. Monday morning, I met with Trevor, Yuki, and Paulo. I showed them everything, the original strategy, Derek's bastardized version, the fraud documentation, the timeline of events. This is insane, Yuki whispered. This is criminal, Paulo corrected. What do you need from us? Trevor asked. Testimony. When the time comes, I need you to confirm what you know. The contract irregularities. The corner cutting, the truth. They looked at each other. Working in the basement had made them cautious. Speaking up could mean retaliation. But finally they nodded. We're in, Trevor said. Someone needs to stop him. I felt something shift. I wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 o'clock. Derek had called it himself, a strategic update to address concerns. He had no idea what was actually coming. I'd spent 3 days coordinating with Patricia. She'd arranged for me to access the presentation system remotely. When Derek loaded his slides, mine would appear instead. It was risky. If it failed, I'd be fired immediately. But playing it safe had gotten me humiliated and buried. I was done being safe. Thursday arrived. I sat in the basement, laptop open, watching the boardroom through the internal camera feed. Derek entered, confident again, wearing his expensive suit. Board members filed in. Patricia sat at the far end, expression neutral. Derek approached the laptop connected to the projector. Thank you all for coming. Today I'll address the audit concerns and present our continued success trajectory. He clicked to begin. The projector flickered to life. Instead of his slides, the screen displayed a single title. The Langford Fraud, How Stolen Strategy Became Corporate Disaster. Derek's face went white. He frantically clicked his laptop. Nothing changed. The next slide appeared, my original strategy document with timestamps, followed by his presentation dated 3 weeks later. Word for word identical. What is this? He shouted. No one answered. The slides continued automatically. Inflated projections, fake invoices, backdated contracts. Doctored financial reports, every piece of fraud displayed methodically. Derek was stammering, trying to explain, but the evidence spoke louder than his excuses. The boardroom had gone completely silent. Executives stared at the screen as my presentation methodically destroyed Derek's credibility. False revenue recognition, unauthorized vendor contracts, misappropriated budget allocations, cost overruns hidden through creative accounting. Each slide was accompanied by documentation, emails, contracts, financial records, all with Derek's digital signature or approval. "This is sabotage," Derek shouted. "Someone hacked the system." Patricia finally spoke. "Derek, these are all official company documents from our secure servers. Are you claiming they're fabricated?" Someone altered them. This is a setup." The slides continued. Now they showed the comparison, my careful, sustainable strategy versus his reckless execution. The board could see exactly how he'd corrupted a sound plan into a financial disaster. The chairman, an older man named Frederick Haynes, stood up. "Mr. Langford, did you or did you not present Marcus Webb's strategy as your own work?" Derek's mouth opened, closed. We collaborated." "The timestamps suggest otherwise." Patricia's voice was ice. "Marcus created this strategy 6 months before your presentation. You presented it 3 weeks after publicly dismissing him." The room erupted in accusations and questions. Derek tried to respond, but no one was listening anymore. Finally, Frederick raised his hand for silence. "This meeting is concluded. Derek, you're suspended pending investigation. Marcus Webb, please remain." News broke within hours. Tech CEO Derek Langford suspended amid fraud investigation. My phone exploded with notifications. Former colleagues texted asking if I was okay. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out. My wife hugged me in the kitchen, crying. "You did it," but I didn't feel victorious. 200 employees worked at this company. Many had families, mortgages, kids in college. Derek's fraud had jeopardized all of them. The stock plummeted 18%. Clients started calling, worried about stability. Vendors demanded immediate payment. I sat in the basement, watching the company implode, and felt sick. The board called an emergency meeting. This time I was invited upstairs. I walked into that same conference room where Derek had humiliated me months ago. The board sat around the table looking exhausted. "Marcus," Frederick began, "we need to contain this disaster. The company is hemorrhaging credibility. We need someone who understands the strategy and can fix the implementation." Patricia added, "Someone the employees trust, someone who actually knows what they're doing." They were offering me Derek's position, interim CEO, the promotion I'd deserved months ago, now arriving in the worst possible circumstances. "I'll do it," I said, "but I need complete authority to restructure operations and full transparency from this board." Frederick nodded. "Done. When can you start?" "I already have." My first week as CEO was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, meeting with investors, calming clients, reassuring employees. I brought Trevor, Yuki, and Paulo upstairs, gave them real titles, real authority. They knew where the problems were buried. Together we started emergency repairs. We renegotiated vendor contracts. We corrected financial projections. We restructured the expansion timeline to match my original sustainable model. Slowly, the bleeding stopped. Employees who'd been terrified of losing their jobs started believing again. The media coverage shifted from scandal to recovery. New CEO Marcus Webb salvages company from predecessor's fraud. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted. Late one night, alone in Derek's old office, my office now, I opened my laptop to clear emails. One caught my attention. The sender, Derek Langford. Subject, please. My hand hovered over the delete button. Every rational part of me said to ignore it, but curiosity won. I opened it. The message was short. "Marcus, I know I have no right to ask, but I'm broke, blacklisted, and desperate. I need work, any work, I'll do anything, please, I'm begging you." I stared at that email for a long time. The man who destroyed me was now begging for my mercy. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt something more complicated, something almost like pity. Almost. I hit reply and typed 3 words, "Come see me." Derek arrived on Tuesday morning. Security called to confirm he was allowed in the building. I said yes. He appeared at my office door wearing a wrinkled suit I recognized from 3 years ago. His hair was longer, grayer. He'd lost weight. The arrogance that once defined him had vanished completely. "Marcus," his voice cracked, "thank you for seeing me." I gestured to a chair. He sat like a man expecting punishment. "I don't know where to start," he began. "I'm sorry. I know that means nothing now, but I'm sorry. I was arrogant and stupid and I destroyed everything." I stayed silent. "No one will hire me. I've applied everywhere. The moment they see my name." He trailed off. "My wife left, took the kids. I'm living in a studio apartment. I've got nothing." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "I need work. Anything. I'll clean offices. I'll do data entry. Whatever you need." Part of me wanted to say no, to watch him suffer the way I'd suffered. But I thought about what Patricia had said, that the company needed fixing, not just revenge. I have a proposal, I said slowly. Derek leaned forward. A 6-month consulting contract, $150,000. His eyes widened, hope flickered. To help restructure the strategic implementation you corrupted. The hope dimmed, understanding dawned. You want me to fix my own mistakes. I want you to learn what you stole, I corrected. He sat back, processing the cruel poetry of it. Finally, he nodded. Okay, yes, thank you. Derek's first day as my consultant was surreal. I assigned him a small office, not the basement, but close. I gave him files to review, implementation reports, market analysis, timeline corrections, all the work he should have done from the beginning. He sat across from me in meetings, taking notes while I explained the strategy he'd stolen. His strategy the world had believed. My strategy, reality insisted. I watched him struggle with concepts he'd presented as his own genius. Market penetration rates confused him. Cost-benefit analyses required multiple explanations. The sustainable growth model, my core innovation, was completely beyond his grasp. How did you develop this? He asked one afternoon, genuine confusion in his voice. 6 months of research, modeling, and testing, I said. The 6 months you spent playing golf with board members. He flinched. Employees walked past his office, whispering. Some glared, others laughed. Derek Langford, former CEO, now a junior consultant, correcting his own disasters. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but I wasn't doing this for public humiliation. I was doing it for something else, documentation. Every meeting was recorded, every conversation logged, every admission captured, because Derek still hadn't acknowledged the most important truth. He'd stolen my work, and I needed him to say it, out loud, on record, for everyone to hear. 3 months into Derek's contract, he'd become almost competent. Not brilliant, he'd never be brilliant, but functional. He understood the basics now, could explain the strategy coherently, fixed implementation errors with minimal guidance. We were in a late session reviewing quarterly projections when exhaustion made him careless. This would have worked from the beginning, he muttered, if I'd actually understood what I was presenting. I looked up. What do you mean? He didn't notice the recording light on my laptop. The board meeting, when I presented your strategy as mine, I just read the slides, I didn't understand the foundation. There it was, casual, unguarded, true. Why did you do it? I asked quietly. He rubbed his face. Because I was terrified. You were brilliant and I was adequate. I knew if the board saw your work, they'd realize they'd promoted the wrong person. So I took credit, convinced myself it was collaboration. He laughed bitterly. I stole your work because I was afraid of you. Silence filled the room. Derek looked up and saw my expression. That's not off the record, is it? I shook my head. No, his face went pale. Marcus, please, you just confessed to intellectual property theft and fraud. I know, but you thought wrong. I closed my laptop. This meeting is over. I didn't tell Derek what I was doing with the recording. I just let him worry. For 2 weeks, he came to work looking increasingly panicked, waiting for the consequences. Meanwhile, I uploaded the confession to the board's secure archive. I included timestamps, context, and documentation showing the pattern of theft. Then I requested a closed board meeting. Derek wasn't invited. Patricia and Frederick listened to the recording in silence. When it finished, Frederick removed his glasses. He confessed to everything. Yes, I said, on record, unprompted. Patricia looked at me. What do you want us to do with this? I'd thought about that question for months. What did I want? To destroy Derek completely, to see him prosecuted, to watch him lose everything. But sitting in that boardroom, I realized something. I'd already won. Terminate his contract, I said. Remove his name from all historical documents. Make it clear the strategy was always mine. And ensure he understands he's permanently barred from any future relationship with this company. Frederick nodded. Done. One more thing, I added. I want public acknowledgement, not revenge, recognition. The board needs to formally attribute the expansion strategy to its actual creator. Patricia smiled slightly. Consider it done. I stood to leave. Marcus, Frederick called. For what it's worth, we should have seen through him from the beginning. You deserved better. I nodded. Yes, I did. Board released a statement 3 days later. Following internal review, the board acknowledges the company's expansion strategy was created by CEO Marcus Webb. Previous misattribution has been corrected in all official documentation. Derek's name vanished from presentations, from press releases, from company history. Langford's initiative became the Webb expansion. Every article, every award mention, every investor document corrected. Derek called me twice. I didn't answer. He sent emails. I didn't respond. His contract was terminated with a brief formal letter. No explanation needed. I signed it myself. The next board meeting, they made it official. I was no longer interim CEO, just CEO. My strategy, my company, my name on everything. Employees applauded when the announcement came, not because they hated Derek, though many did, but because they'd watched me save what he'd almost destroyed. That night, I stayed late in my office, looking at the city lights through the window. My assistant knocked. Mr. Webb, there's one more item, Derek's final email. I hesitated, then nodded. She forwarded it. The subject line, you win. The message, I know you won't read this, but I need to say it anyway. You were always better than me. Smarter, harder working, more deserving. I was never built to lead. I just wore the costume better. You win, Marcus, completely. I read it twice. Then archived it without responding. Some victories don't need acknowledgement. 6 months after becoming CEO, the company had fully recovered. Stock prices exceeded pre-scandal levels. We'd successfully entered 2 new markets using my sustainable model. Revenue was up 38%, real revenue, not Derek's inflated fantasies. Clients trusted us again. Employees felt secure. I'd hired a new executive team, promoted from within, people who'd proven their competence rather than their connections. Trevor ran infrastructure. Yuki led data operations. Paulo became chief compliance officer. The basement was empty now, just storage space again. Late one evening, my wife visited the office. She found me at my desk reviewing expansion plans for year 2. You did it, she said. You actually did it. I looked up. Did what? Got everything back. Your work, your recognition, your position. Derek lost everything and you won. I thought about that. I didn't win, I just stopped losing. Is there a difference? Yeah, I closed the laptop. Winning would have been if Derek never stole my work, if I'd been promoted on merit, if those 6 months of humiliation never happened. She sat on the edge of my desk. But you survived it. You fought back. That counts for something. It did. I'd learned I was stronger than I thought, more patient, more strategic. Derek's betrayal had forged something harder in me, not bitterness, resilience. I keep hearing his laugh, I admitted, from that first meeting. Sometimes I wake up hearing it. Does it still hurt? I considered. No, now it reminds me never to be silent again. The company continued thriving. We expanded into a 3rd market, hired 200 new employees, won industry awards, real ones earned honestly. My name appeared in business publications, not as the guy who exposed fraud, but as the strategist who'd built something sustainable. Derek Langford became a cautionary tale. Business schools used the case study, the cost of stolen innovation. Articles analyzed his rise and fall, but mostly people forgot him. That's the thing about corporate scandals. They're sensational briefly, then fade into footnotes. One afternoon, I got a message from Patricia. Thought you'd want to know Derek is working at a startup. Junior operations role. He's fine. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just indifference. He was someone else's problem now. My focus was forward. The strategy I'd created was entering phase 3. We were exploring international markets, sustainable expansion, long-term growth. Everything I'd envisioned originally, now happening the right way. People called it a comeback story. Articles, from basement to boardroom, Marcus Webb's rise. But it wasn't a comeback, it was a correction. The universe had bent toward justice, slowly, painfully, but eventually. I'd stopped being the person who stayed silent while others stole credit. I'd become someone who fought back, someone who demanded recognition, someone who refused to be erased. And that, more than any title or salary, felt like peace. A business journalist requested an interview for a profile piece. We met in my office, afternoon light streaming through windows that used to be Derek's view. She asked about the turnaround, the strategy, the company's future, standard questions. Then near the end, whatever happened to Derek Langford? He just disappeared from the industry. I smiled slightly. The question I'd been waiting for. Derek worked here briefly as a consultant. He taught me something valuable. She leaned forward, sensing a story. What was that? What happens when you mistake someone's silence for weakness? She laughed, thinking it was a clever line. She didn't know Derek had actually worked for me. Didn't know about the recordings, the confession, the poetic justice of making him fix his own disasters. The article would publish without those details. Just a philosophical observation from a successful CEO, but Derek would read it. Wherever he was, whatever junior role he'd landed, he'd see that quote and know exactly what I meant. He'd understand that I could have destroyed him publicly, could have prosecuted him, could have made his humiliation complete. Instead, I'd let him fade into obscurity while I succeeded with the work he'd stolen. That was the real victory, not revenge, displacement. I'd simply taken my rightful place, and he'd been erased by his own mediocrity. The journalist closed her notebook. That's a great quote. I looked out at the city, at the company I'd saved, at the future I'd built. Yeah, I said, it really is.